Welcome to this Grasshopper tutorial about basic vectors, where we'll be setting up a simple single-point vector field. In this video, we will be using Rhino and Grasshopper to create a field of rectangular geometry, which orients itself based upon each individual shape's relationship to a single orientation point. You will be able to modify the rectangle's proportions and the location of the point to create unique patterns. In this tutorial, you will learn how to set up vectors between two sets of points, how to preview vectors in Rhino and Grasshopper, how to draw lines using vectors, and finally, how to use these lines to create three-point rectangles. Let's get started. We're going to start by setting up a square grid of points. This will be the base of our vector field. So here under the fourth tab, vector grid square, drop that on the canvas, and we're just going to change three of these parameters. So our cell size, let's do a value of 5. So double click on the canvas, 5. That will give me a slider between 0 and 10 for my cell size. The number of grid cells in the X direction, let's do 15, double click 15. And in the Y direction, let's do 25. So this will give me, and we'll drop an area component at the end of our cells, and this will give me the center of those. And let's just turn the preview for our grid off because we don't need that, we just need the points. So we are going to use these points to find the vector between these points and a single point somewhere within this field. So we're going to come here into Rhino and just draw a single point somewhere within this field. So I'm just going to plop it right there. And now we need to input this point into Grasshopper. So here, the first parameters tab, let's just drop a point parameter on the canvas. Right click that, set one point, and that is now been referenced. I'm just going to select the point container, right click, and make that into a group. And I'm going to name that vector orientation point. And the points coming out of my area component, let's put those also into a point container. And we're going to put that into a group and name that one vector field base points. So we have two sets of points, and I'm just going to turn the preview for that off. And so our vector field base points and our vector orientation points. We are now going to start setting up our vectors. So here under the fourth tab, the vector subtab, and the vector tab, the final subtab is vector as well. We're going to find this vector 2 points component, which will find the vector or the direction between 2 points. So we're going to drop that on the canvas. Our point A will be our base points for our vector field. So we're just going to drop the results of this point component into input A, and then the vector orientation points will be point B. So it has turned gray. You'll see that nothing has changed in the Rhino display because a vector is a somewhat abstract concept. It is a direction. It isn't it has no geometric form, so to speak. We use vectors to control geometry, but they have no form in and of themselves. So we will, there's a helpful component though to display what the vector is doing, the direction of the vectors. And that's here under the display tab. And then there's a vector display subtab under this, and we're going to use this one, vector display. We'll just drop that on the canvas. A is the anchor, or our base points, so we use the vector field base points for our anchor, and V is the vector itself. So we'll put those into the V input. So a line, so to speak, is being drawn. It's actually an arrow between each one of these base points and our orientation point. To make that a little bit simpler to see, I'm going to do one more thing, and I'm going to come back here to the Vector tab. So the fourth tab, Vector, and then the sub-tab, Amplitude. So vectors have two properties, so to speak. So one is a direction, and the second one is an amplitude or a strength. You can think of that as the length of the vector. So I'm going to take the vectors that I've drawn with the vector 2-point component. I'm going to put those into the vector input on amplitude. And then for the amplitude itself, I'm just going to override that with a common value for all of my vectors. So I'm just going to put a slider here, and let's just say 5, which is our cell size. And then I'm going to input that into the vector display. So now you can see these arrows a bit more clearly. And if I come back into Rhino and I select that point that I've drawn and I move this, you'll see how the vectors will reorient themselves to always be facing that orientation point. So you can move that around a bit, experiment, and then just drop it back into the field for the next step. I'm now going to use my vectors to orient some pieces of geometry. So I'm going to just do some fairly simple rectangles. I'm going to first just delete this vector display. I'll also delete the amplitude component. And now we're going to start by drawing some rectangles. I'm not going to use the rectangle component itself though yet. Instead, I'm just going to be drawing some lines. So here under the Curves subtab, Curves, Primitive, and I'm going to use this component, Line SDL. So Line SDL will draw a line with a start point. My start point for my lines will be my vector field base points. A direction, so directions are vectors. So I'm going to use my vector 2-point output for the input of my line directions. And if you zoom in, you'll notice that some lines have started, and the final component will be the length of the lines. I have this slider already on the canvas, this 5, so I'll just drop that in. And now you can see my line. So this is also another way you can preview the vector field. It's just by drawing a simple line with the SDL component, which will orient the geometry to that. Now to make my rectangles, what I'm going to do is two things. I'm going to offset the lines in the positive and negative direction. And for that, I'm going to use the offset component. So here under Curve Utilities, we have the offset curve component. Drop that on the canvas. And so the curves I'm going to offset are the lines. And the distance I'm going to offset them will be, I'm going to actually do 2 offsets. I'm going to do one in the positive direction and one in the negative direction. So I'm going to drop a slider onto the canvas right now. And let's just say 1.25. And so what I want this to be doing is I want this to be offsetting half the distance in the positive direction and half the distance in the negative direction. So to do that, we'll just come here under the Maths subtab, Maths, Operators, Division, and we'll divide that value by 2. So I'm going to add a panel, double click, double quotes, 2, and that will be my division. So my first offset will be half of this value. And my second offset, I'm just going to copy this, Control C, Control V. And so now I have a second offset, but this time I want the distance to be negative. So here, Maths, Operators, negative. So the negative of that value will offset in the other direction. And for the final step, I'm now going to create some rectangles with the endpoints of these two lines. So here under curve, primitive, and we'll use the rectangle 3-point component. Drop that on the canvas. So we have A, B, C. So we need 3 points. And so for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the endpoints of the two lines I've offset. And to do that, we need the endpoints component. So curve, analysis, endpoints. And this will give me the start and the finish of each one of those offset curves. I'm going to copy this, Control-C, Control-V. And I'm going to just use, you just need to use 3 of the 4 points which have been output. It doesn't matter exactly which of the 3 of the 4 you use, just 3 of the 4 will give you a rectangle. So I'm going to turn the preview for some of these things off just so we can see. So the preview for that off, the preview for that. So basically the preview for everything I'm going to turn off, and also my initial line, turn that preview off as well. So I'm only left with the rectangles and my anchor points. I could turn the preview for the anchor points off as well. Let's just do that. Preview, preview. I'll keep my orientation point on for now. So now I have the rectangles, and if I come back here into Rhino and I move my vector field orientation point, you'll see how it's how all these rectangles are orienting themselves to this. I'm going to do just a bit of cleanup here. So this parameter, which is now named A, I'm going to rename this, so double click that, and I'm going to call this rectangle width. So that's the width of my rectangles. And this component, which is the length going into my SDL, I'm going to rename that rectangle length. And I like to just group my parameters, select those and group those, and I like to put them into a red group just so I can quickly see which are the parameters that are adjustable in this particular example. For the final step, I'm going to just give the rectangles a bit of a color. So here under the Surfaces tab and the boundary surfaces, so the surfaces freeform boundary surfaces, and we'll just drop those in. And here under Display, we'll use the Custom Preview component, Display Preview, Custom Preview. And then we'll come here, the first tab, Parameters, Utilities, Parameters Input, Color Swatch, and let's just give them an orangish color. So yeah, that's basically it. We can come back here and adjust our width, our length, to kind of start to change the effects of the field. One other thing to notice is if you change the vector inputs from this initial orientation, so let's put the base points into here and the orientation points into A. Well, you can't really see it now. Let's just make this length a bit longer again. So now the rectangles are pushing away from the point rather than going to. So we have that. Let's just reverse that one more time just so you can kind of see. So here they're orienting to the point, and if we reverse that, they are now orienting away from the point. If you would like access to a completed version of this script along with 2 other vector field scripts, there's a link in the description where you can download this from my blog. And for this particular example, there's a second version which does allow for multiple points. It's something you could set up on your own, but you could also get the multiple points of version from the blog. So let me just disable this and enable this version, which will give you the same script, but this time it orients to 1, 2, 3, or as many points as you want, and it will orient your rectangles to the closest point. So this would help me, support this blog, and support this channel if you feel inclined. So please check it out. Thanks for watching.